Hey, folks, what's up? Welcome to Moment of Clarity. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for being amazing people. Please take a second to hit thumbs up or share this or whatever you got to do. Uh, thanks for being here. Uh, I've got, I've actually got a couple of guests on this episode. Hopefully they show up. That's the fun of a live broadcast. Is the guests don't always show up, and you just got to roll with the punches. But reality winner should be here in a few minutes, and also Graham Elwood will be joining us a little later as well. So more guests than usual. I'm jam packing this show today. But I have some stories to go into before we get to that. So thanks for being here. I thought we'd start off with this story about Alex Jones. Many of you probably noticed this, probably saw this story. It was in the mainstream media. Alex Jones forced to pay close to $1 billion, according to the courts. I don't know how much of that he'll actually ever pay, but forced to pay $1 billion, $950 million to Sandy Hook families for claiming that the 2012 school massacre was a government hoax. Let me fix that dumb background. But so here's the thing: is as you can see in my tweet about it, I'm no supporter of Alex Jones. Alex Jones is a fucking fraudster, scam artist, pathetic, sociopath human being who is out for money, and that is it. He has no interest in anything other than money. I think, if you have half a brain, you hopefully figured that out about him pretty quick. That doesn't mean everything he's ever said is false. He's said plenty of things that are correct, going after a lot of big corporations that he's gone after over the years. Absolutely legit on certain things. But if anything's not going to make him money, he's not doing it. And if anything's going to make him money, he's usually going to do it. And that's why he spends however many, 45 minutes every couple hours telling you to buy fucking meteorite extraction syrups or whatever the fuck he sells. All the shit he sells. Honestly, it's just like loads of garbage. This is a guy who literally sells snake oil, and people don't know that he's a fraud. Anyway, so he makes up this garbage about Sandy Hook. Oh, it was all fake. It was it was a bunch of. They got a bunch of child crisis actors or whatever the fuck he said. All just stupid. I mean, flat earther level stuff. So then they go after him on that fact, and the families are ultimately able to win this verdict that just happened. Now, as I put in that tweet, I am no fan of Alex Jones, but the whole pay $1 billion because you were knowingly wrong about this story. And he also did dox some people. So look, I could understand someone saying you legitimately gave out someone's address so that they could be harmed. Okay, but this obviously goes beyond that, because I think he only doxed one or two people, whereas this is many families, which explains the number. $950 million is a bunch of families all getting payments from him, if they ever collect on any of the money. So that it's bullshit. Like, because I think the same, if you're going to do it to Alex Jones, the same shit should happen to the New York Times for saying they were WMD in Iraq, which helped manufacture consent for war, which helped kill 1 million people. That's the estimate. That's not me throwing out numbers. The estimate is 1 million people have died in Iraq from our bombs and the destruction of their infrastructure, etc. And that's just Iraq as one example. Of course, we do this, and our mainstream media does this again and again and again with the chemical weapons attacks in Syria that now whistleblowers, 4 separate whistleblowers of the OPCW have come forward and said didn't happen. With the bullshit we came up with to invade and destroy Libya. We do this again and again to destroy countries. And eventually this shit's usually proven false. Sometimes the media is willing to admit that they got it wrong. Oh, with WMD, man, yeah. So it turns out we got that wrong on the WMD, but they never pay any kind of restitution for their victims, for the destruction they caused, for the havoc they wreak. Like, I mean, imagine if CNN or MSNBC or all of these fucking bullshit, Fox News, all these bullshit outlets that just spray fire hose level of misinformation, propaganda, whatever the U.S. government garbage is of the week. Imagine if they had to pay even $1 for every time they did that. If I had $1 for every time the mainstream media was spraying falsehoods, I'd be a rich man. So, of course, none of that happens. They just use Alex Jones. And here's the thing, is Alex Jones has also been used. And for those of you who joined late, I'm no supporter of Alex Jones. I think he's one of the most clear scam artists you could imagine. He is a legit, literal snake oil salesman. And so I'm no supporter of him. However, I think that he is often used in the past several years. He's been used as a test balloon to see what the ruling class, the ruling elite can get away with in order to destroy alternative and independent outlets. So, he was the first one to get banned on all these social media platforms, right? He was one of the first. They rid him from these platforms. And I said at the time that I don't agree with Alex Jones. I find him to be a scam artist. I find him to be fucking horrific. He doesn't give a shit about anyone. And all of that is true. But I said at the time, and I say now, that he was the test balloon to see whether they could get away with deplatforming people and whether it would really matter, whether there was any kind of pushback that was truly problematic. And they found no, there was nothing. They found that absolutely they could deplatform people. And I said at the time, this is years ago, several years ago, I said they're coming after us next. Us being true leftists, us being truly the anti-war, us being truly anti-imperialist, us being truly anti-capitalist. Those of us out there, I said, we will be the ones that are purged next. And here I am with my main YouTube channel banned globally, my over 1,000 videos banned globally, my podcast deleted from Spotify, my Facebook shadow banned where barely anybody sees it, and my Twitter, moderately banned, moderately shadow banned. So I was right about all of that. Alex Jones was the test balloon. And very few people were willing to stand up for his right to say filth, because they were like, who's going to stand up for Alex Jones? But then, sure enough, they came after us. So I fear, and I hope I'm wrong, that this is another test balloon, right? This is another, let's see if we can, in the courts, financially destroy someone. And we can then, so at first we'll go after Alex Jones, and that's an easy, early victim. And then we'll move on to others that, and I do think it'd be much harder to go after those of us who actually speak the truth, whereas Alex Jones was making up some ridiculous bullshit about Sandy Hook. So it's easier to go after someone who is making shit up than those of us who are speaking the truth. So I will say that it would be a lot harder. However, truth does not always protect you. Eugene Debs was locked up for speaking the truth. Lenny Bruce was locked up for speaking the truth and chased to his death. There's been many people throughout the years in America. Julian Assange, of course, is locked up for speaking the truth. Mumia Abu-Jamal framed and locked up for speaking the truth. So there's many examples. Snowden would be locked up for speaking the truth if he were in the United States. So there's many examples, and truth does not protect you. But I will say it probably makes it a little harder to do what they're doing to Alex Jones, which is destroy his livelihood, but also trying to crush him financially. Now, again, I don't give a shit about Alex Jones. All right, this guy's a fucking awful, awful human being, awful scam artist. But I will say that it the fact that that's done to him and not done to our mainstream media that has manufactured consent for war. The estimates are we've killed 6 million people, a million in Iraq, but 6 million total in just the war on terror over the past 20 years. Just the war on terror, 20 years, 6 million people are dead. And our US media has manufactured consent for all of that. Are they suffering any kind of ramifications? Is anyone jailed for it? Is anyone forced to pay some kind of crazy amounts of money for it? No. Of course not. Because they're doing the American government, the ruling elite's bidding of putting forward that propaganda. So you're never going to see that. You're never going to see the New York Times pay money restitution for their victims of their manufacturing consent. Never. And yet we will see it against someone like Alex Jones, apparently, who now owes $1 billion to the families he's harmed. Now, I get that some people may go, well, it has to do with whether you know what you're doing is wrong, or maybe because Alex Jones knew that Sandy Hook did happen, and he said it anyway because he knew it got clicks. But maybe the New York Times thought there were WMD in Iraq. And I'm like, fucking no, they didn't. No, they didn't. They didn't think there was motherfucking WMD in Iraq. And they know that Ukraine's a proxy war. Leon Panetta, the former head of the CIA, said it was a proxy war. Said we're in a proxy war in Ukraine. Meaning we're destroying Ukraine with Russia. The two of us are destroying Ukraine. Two of us meaning countries. Because the U.S. government doesn't give a fuck about Ukrainian people, and they're fine with destroying Ukraine so that it can help drain Russia and put sanctions on Russia. So the New York Times, unless they're fucking morons, which most of them are not, they know. They know. So yeah, the idea that we didn't know about WMD. We didn't know that the Cuba wasn't firing an audio gun, an acoustic weapon at diplomats, giving them a light headache. We thought that's what was happening. Did you? Did you really? Yeah. For those who didn't follow that story, for several years, the past few years, they said Cuba was firing an acoustic weapon at just the diplomats, just U.S. diplomats in Cuba, giving them light headaches and sleeplessness, some of them for a week. Because, the old light headache gun, that's doing some real damage. And then the CIA came out a few months ago and said, yeah, no, Cuba wasn't firing an acoustic weapon, which, I mean, how could you not know that was bullshit? So anyway, I very much again don't give a shit about Alex Jones. If he's destroyed financially, I don't care. But what this represents, I very much worry about what this represents going forward. So let's see this. If Reality Winner doesn't show up, by the way, for those of you joining late, I am supposed to have Reality Winner, the NSA leaker who served many years in prison she's the was the longest serving civilian prosecuted under the Espionage Act. And I'm sure she will join us in the future if she's not here today. But that's the problem with doing a live show. You trust all will go as planned. All right. Well, but I do have either way, unless he also doesn't show up, I should have Graham Elwood on in a bit as well. But let's go to another story, which I didn't have time to cover last week. This happened a week ago, but it was a massive protest in support of Julian Assange. in DC, but the biggest one was in London. And let's see here. I can play a clip of Stella Morris speaking at it. Basically, they encircled Parliament in London in support of Julian Assange, and it was massive. It was thousands there, and I want to play a clip of. So this is tweeted out by Mint Press News, who I also work for. Great outlet. If you get a chance, check them out. And I want to play a clip from Stella Morris, who is Julian Assange's wife and mother of his two children. And I spoke to her on email, and she, says hi and says free Julian Assange, and says Julian knows that all you folks are supporting him, and it means a lot to him. So, just know that. I know this is a long fight for his freedom, and it is fucking obnoxious, fucking horrific, really, how long it's gone on. But all right, here is her speaking, Stella Morris speaking at outside Parliament.
I'd like to thank everyone who has come to form this human chain around Parliament. The human chain is self-proving. Julian has enormous support, enough support and much more. He has millions of people around the world who are disgusted by the injustice that is unfolding in the middle of London. Julian is suffering. And part of the point of making this human chain was to show that what is happening here is not a legitimate legal process. It is the instrumentalization of the law in order to persecute a person, a journalist, in order to keep him in prison indefinitely for almost 4 years. How can anyone possibly justify this atrocity? People around the world are witnessing this atrocity, and that is what compels them to come here to show their solidarity, to show that they care about Julian, that they believe in justice, that they see what is happening here is a state that has committed crimes against innocents, that is now committing crimes against the journalist who exposed those crimes they committed. Let's not forget that the US planned to assassinate Julian in the UK while he was in the embassy, and now they've put him in the harshest prison in the UK for almost 4 years. Open your eyes. Free Julian Assange.
Free Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange. Free.
So there it is. Stella Morris, Julian Assange's wife, speaking outside Parliament a week ago. And you saw in that for a brief second standing next to her was Jeremy Corbyn. And, I think what Corbyn represents is the fact that anyone who is legitimately cares about justice or human rights or press freedom, all of those things, they would be there. Or at least supportive. And Corbyn's there, but you're not going to see anyone else, right, from UK government standing next to Stella Morris. You're maybe going to see some ex-MPs like Craig Murray or George Galloway, who have steadfastly supported Assange. But it's similar in the US. Very few. I mean, I'm trying to think. Like Bernie Sanders, I believe, has said free Julian Assange. But very few US politicians at the federal level have said that, because they care more about getting the donations from their corporate donors and keeping the mainstream media on their side than actual justice of any kind. So, yeah, but it was amazing to see that many people. We had a show in London just a couple days ago, and I had wanted to get there for the human chain around the Parliament, but I couldn't make it. A couple days late, so unfortunately I couldn't be there. But it's just amazing to see that many people coming out for Julian Assange, and obviously he's sick now. He's in solitary confinement. They continue to torture him. Solitary confinement is a form of torture. So, for those who say like, oh, we don't torture, meaning US or UK. Yeah, you fucking do. Yeah, you absolutely do. Anyway, we got to just keep the fight. We got to keep the fight for Julian Assange because he revealed the truths that we should all know about our government, about many governments, about the UK government, US, China, Russia, Australia, his home country, Peru. There's just so many on that list. The big banks. There's so many on that list that he revealed information about, and that's why they're all going after him at one time. Because they cannot continue to rule if we have the truth about that reality, about the way they behave behind closed doors. One of the biggest, and if you haven't read it, check out the WikiLeaks files. It's called The Book, which Julian at least edited, if not wrote most of, but at least edited. And it largely focuses on the State Department cables, the U.S. State Department cables, which revealed everything about everything in the U.S. government and reveals how they fucking go about their business and what kind of a criminal organization they are. And again, that's why they're trying to stop him. That's why they have to stop him. So, anyway, I'm glad that event for Julian Assange was so large and so powerful. Really fucking cool. All right, I want to get to another story. And by the way, for those of you who are joining me, for the first time, I do these live streams every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday at noon Eastern. And then Friday is for members only at leecamp.net. The others are at rumble.com/leecamp. If you're watching on another platform, then please know that in 10 to 20 minutes, this will go to just rumble.com/leecamp. So right now it's on many platforms, but eventually it'll be rumble.com/leecamp because my other main YouTube channel has been banned around the world. So I've had to find other outlets that will not ban me. So I hope you'll go become a member over there or subscribe over there. It's free to watch, obviously. All right, I want to do another story here. And again, for those of you joining late, I'm sorry. It seems that Reality Winner can't make it. And that's the beauty of doing a live show. You never know when someone can't make it. But I'm sure she'll be on a future episode. So anyway, I want to get to what Tulsi Gabbard's up to. And here's the thing is, I have not, there's people that have been like the fucking hardcore Tulsi haters from day one. And then there's people who've been the hardcore Tulsi lovers from day one. And I've been in the middle area, which is like, I'll analyze Tulsi Gabbard per comment. Like for each comment she says, I'll decide if that makes sense or if that works, if it seems like she's being a genuine person. And for a while, it seemed like she was being a genuine person. She supported healthcare for all and all those things. She seems to be legitimately anti-war, and she has kept that stance. However, and here's the thing, I'm fine with her leaving the Democratic Party. I don't know why I do know why she was in the Democratic Party, because she wanted to get the Democratic structure it's easier if you're in the Democratic structure to win presidency. So I get why she was sticking with that. But she just left the Democratic Party. I have no problem with that. She's also vehemently anti-war. So am I. All right, great. We're in agreement on that front. But then it's where she gets into other things outside of that it gets a little dicey. And it starts to show who she really is. Or at least who she really is now. I don't think I know who she really is. She seems to go wherever the wind blows. For a while there was the Bernie Sanders wave, and she kind of surfed on that, which I have no problem with if you're gonna, if you're standing for good stuff, you're standing for healthcare for all. All right, surf that wave. But then Bernie Sanders has been destroyed and maligned, and they rigged him out of the primaries, obviously, and then once he'd already been rigged out of, he then shot himself in the foot by running around endorsing Hillary everywhere. But so now she sees the writing on the wall that that's not working anymore, and so she's moved on to become like the queen of Fox News, which to me that kind of shows like, hey, this is the quintessential example of someone who's not a genuine person. Like if you're like, one day you're like, I'm with the Bernie Sanders crew, and then the next day you're like, I'm with the Tucker Carlson crew. That means you either don't know what you believe or you're kind of a fraud and you're just looking for where you can get coverage and votes. And anyway, the latest thing is that she announced she was leaving the Democratic Party, and then she put up this one today. Today's Democratic Party racializes everything, blatantly stokes anti-white racism, reducing each of us as God's children to the color of our skin, using identity politics to tear us apart for their own political gain. Now, let's think about this comment. Here's the thing, is I'm fine with accusing the Democratic Party of using identity politics. They absolutely do. They fucking use it all the time. That's one of their go-tos. But the whole act, this is her comment is a Fox News dog whistle. It is saying, hey folks, are you tired of pretending like racism is real? Then join me, because I will never talk about racism unless I'm talking about anti-white racism. This is a bullshit comment, because you can make this comment that the Democratic Party only cares about identity politics to get votes. Fine, make that comment. But only if you also are doing a lot of work talking about how fucking racist America is. We have a racist history. We have a racist present. Like, we have systemic racism. And I don't think nowadays, I don't know what she did when she was Queen Bernie Sanders, but nowadays, I don't think Tulsi Gabbard is saying a lot about systemic racism, okay? Because she's trying to win over the Fox News crowd. So she's gone from supposedly caring about racism or systemic racism to now being like, the real problem is anti-white racism. Is it? Considering the history of America, is anti-white racism really the problem? Again, criticize the Democratic Party for bringing up identity politics as a way to get votes. Absolutely. The Democratic Party is fucking garbage. Because, they'll fucking slap a rainbow flag on a bomb and say that means they're peaceful. They'll put a woman in one of the highest office in the land, like whether it's Hillary or Kamala Harris, and say, oh, look, she has a vagina, so that makes it all good. And it's like, no, it's the same shit. It doesn't matter if she has a vagina or not. The key is to have a vagina and then also stand for things other than all the fucking assholes with penises. Assholes with Penises is the name of my next album. So, yes, identity politics, criticize that all you want, but you've got to also do the other side of the work. The other side of the work is criticizing systemic racism in America, criticizing the incredibly racist history we have and the racist present we have. Tulsi Gabbard's not doing that. Tulsi Gabbard is trying to get the Fox News people to think she's, should be the next president, I think, is her main goal. And I don't know what the fuck she actually stands for. I don't know if it matters. I think she doesn't actually have a moral core at this point, because you can't believe all these things at once. You've got to pick something you believe in an ongoing manner, and not just throw it out the window the moment you see the new tide surfing along. All right, well, let's get to who was going to be our second guest, but is now our first guest, because I love when, my favorite thing is when I name an episode after a guest who doesn't show up. That's my favorite thing. But, all right, he and I co-host a podcast called Government Secrets, and I hope you guys have listened to it. If you've never listened to it, then what the fuck's your problem? It's an amazing pie. We've done 100 episodes, and we just did live shows, and we go through American history. Anyway, but he is far more than that. In fact, if you were to ask him what he's all about, I think he would not even want to mention government secrets. So please welcome Graham Elwood. Hey, Graham.
What's up, buddy? I mean, I love that. Like, hey, speaking of assholes with penises, Graham Elwood, everybody. Here he is.
I always give you the best intros. Yes. Since you kind of start off the government secrets every week, I get to make fun of your intro every week. So
this is awesome. I'm like, oh, now I know what Lee goes through when he listens to me just kind of babble on before I introduce government secrets.
Yep. How you doing, buddy? Where are you now?
I'm in beautiful New York City, which I'm sure you're going to hear sirens at some point. And because I've got a show Tuesday night here. I was just in Europe for 2 weeks, which was awesome, and we did a bunch of shows there, which was it was such a blast. So
we for those watching, Graham and I played London, Berlin, and Stockholm, and London is going to be our 100th episode. The audio is going to be our 100th episode of Government Secrets, coming out any day now. So if you've never listened to it, that's a good way to start. Episode 100.
There was several people at each one of these shows in Europe that were like, hey, I just found out about you guys. And I said, oh, start from the beginning. And somebody standing next to them who's been a fan of ours from the beginning was like, oh, I'm so jealous that you get to start and listen to all of the stuff we've covered and done and laughed about. And so I tell people, if you're new to the podcast, start at episode 1 and just start working your way up. And
it's not, sometimes we riff about something topical, but in general, it's all about history, or sometimes modern history, something that happened in the last few years, but it's all about government secrets that, don't get old listening to them. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to run out of awful stuff the United States government has done. I don't know if that's going to happen.
I mean, we might run out of CIA created electric dragonflies. Those might dwindle, but
which we covered in the Berlin episode. People can see, because so for people who are government secret fans, the Stockholm episode is already up on, if you're a Patreon member. And then we're going to release the audio for London this week in the next couple of days. And then we'll also put the Berlin episode on Patreon as well.
So let's get into, we'll get into a bunch of topics that are going on right now around the world. But let's talk about where you're at right now. You're doing some live shows that, don't involve me. Not that I'm offended at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a deliberate no Lee camp tour. So I don't know if that title really bums you out, but I don't know. That wasn't my idea. That was just the promoter said no Lee camp.
No Lee camp tour. Yeah.
So, I'm in New York City. So I've got a show tomorrow night, the Tuesday, the 18th at 7 p.m. at the Broadway Comedy Club, and Carrie Burt, a local comic, is emceeing, and also Naomi Caravani, who worked with you at RT at Redacted. She's gonna pop in and do a set, which is cool. And then it's she just reached out to me, so that's really cool. And then I'm going throughout the Midwest because I'm taping my comedy special in Chicago next week, the 26th. So I'm doing Madison October 20th, which is Thursday, and then the 21st I go to Detroit, and the 22nd I am in Cincinnati, and then the 26th I'm in Chicago to tape my first ever comedy special. And it's an hour of, I cover a wide range of stuff, but there's a lot of me talking about how the whole system is broken, and so if people go to grahamelwood.com, and I really, you're supporting what I'm doing, you're supporting independent artists, you're supporting, these are all like independent clubs too, like you're supporting small businesses, and also you're supporting freedom of speech. So you and I are, we joke, but it's the truth. Government Secrets is hosted by the two most censored comedians in America. And, we should mention this we were going to do probably in the neighborhood of 6 or more cities in Europe. And several people emailed us and said, oh, we had this comic that was really trying to help us out. This guy, Steve, was a great guy and he busted his ass. But some venues emailed back and said, oh, we support, Ukrainian refugees or whatever. And since Lee and Graham have been on Russian TV, we don't think that's appropriate, which was like, that's the crazy state of affairs we're in.
Yeah.
Is two comedians who have openly said numerous times on 1,000 different platforms, we're against the Putin's invasion, but we are also, two things can exist at the same time. We're holding America's involvement in this accountable, and who's suffering the worst is the Ukrainian people. So even though we say that a million times, we're immediately just viewed as this sort of like pro-Russian comedians or something.
Right, because you can't actually be anti-war. When I tell people my YouTube, when they've never, for people who've never heard Redacted Night, never heard of anything I do, and they're like, oh, you're a comedian, and they find out that my YouTube is banned around the world. They say, what did you do or what did you say? And I was like, well, I'm anti-war and anti-imperialist. And they go, why would that get you banned? Well, I don't understand. You can't be fully anti-war. You can be anti-Russia, but you can't be anti-war. And for those of us who are, it's tough for me to keep up of all the ways we've been censored. But yeah, we had a bunch of gigs that we couldn't do in Europe because people wouldn't have us on their stage. But then also, this is hilarious. Your billboard in Times Square, which you've now been redacted out of.
I want to see if I can share this so the audience can see it. So first of all, I should mention a couple things. First of all, hats off to the 3 venues in Europe that did have us, and they had us without any. They loved us, and they were really supportive. Cosmic Comedy in Berlin, Laughing House in Stockholm, and Backyard Comedy in London. Those are 3 clubs that had us without batting an eye, didn't care. They were like, so support those 3 clubs just in general because they're free. They're okay with freedom of speech. But so this 5-city tour that I'm doing in the States is obviously for the 4 shows leading up to the comedy special. Like I need to run my hour to get it ready, right? This is, and so I've reached out to all these cool venues who've been very supportive, and I've done a bunch of things. I've bought radio ads, I'm doing social media ads, and I did a little research on these digital billboard ads, and I found this company Blip, which is they're a great company, and they've got digital ad, and it's very affordable. Like it's really, I thought billboards are all thousands of dollars, the digital ones, and it's great. And so I saw that they had a billboard in Times Square. The Broadway Comedy Club that I'm doing tomorrow night at the 18th is in Times Square, just right off of Times Square.
So for anyone out there in New York, tomorrow night you can go see Graham. And
yes,
and everybody, Graham's stand-up is fucking excellent because unlike me, who had no way to perform for 3 years, basically, Graham's been working out his shit while everybody else was just screwed. But yeah, so yeah, and your ad was just going to say,
here's what it was going to say. So I'm going to show everybody the ad. So
it said fuck America, I will fuck our president in his face hole, right? That's what it said.
It's just me making out with Putin, and everybody got all mad. I don't know what the problem was. No, so I wanted to buy a billboard in Times Square, and this is the one. Can you see that?
Oh yeah. 1 second. I just gotta put it up. Oh wait, hold on. There it is.
So there's the ad. Graham Elwood Live, Tuesday, October 18th at 7 p.m. Tickets at BroadwayComedyClub.com.
I do find your facial expression a little aggressive. So I don't know if that's what they decided was too offensive, but
so the ad agency approved it. The owner of the billboard said this was too political, and they asked them like, "What? This was too political?
What was your teeth are political? What was too political?"
I don't know. I mean, my little surfer puka shell necklace, is that too political?
But so folks, keep in mind this cannot be shown in Times Square. What you're looking at
this is forbidden.
Meanwhile, 10 years ago, Times Square was just all fucking,
porn and
strip clubs and drug dealers. And now Graham Elwood's face is too offensive.
So my face is too offensive. So what we ended up, and so they said, hey man, we're really sorry, we tried. And I said, and I just was like, I'm not giving up on this, because I know Times Square, it's all tourists looking for stuff to do. They're looking for shows. And I thought, well, you know, those secret singer shows that are on whatever, on one channel. So I came up with this. I said, what if we replace my name and put a question mark over my face? So this Lee Camp was approved, and I'm told just started running in Times Square today. And as soon as we're done with this, I'm going to go to Times Square and get a photo of this. But this right here.
Your face legit got redacted.
Yes. My name and face are too offensive or too political for Times Square. Like, special secret show. That's the state of America right now. All
right. So we got like 5 more minutes, because actually Reality Winner is here. She has shown up, so I'm gonna bring her on in a minute. But I wanted to, we'll go through which cities again for everybody out there, so you can go see Graham live. But I wanted to hit on this story, which you wanted to touch on, which I think is totally important. But it's going on in Haiti right now, and Haiti, you know, is not doing well, and the U.S. wants to send help, right?
Oh.
And so this is what we announced today. Is Canada and the U.S. send military equipment to Haiti. The equipment is supposedly to help the national police to fight against criminal actors amid a month-long turmoil. But here's the thing. The U.S. has done everything to destroy Haiti for decades and decades and decades. And now it's basically like us saying, hey, we've robbed your house. We've been burning it down for decades. Here's a gun as a gift.
I mean, it's so America in a nutshell. There's 2 reasons I wanted to talk about this. Is one, it's something that we talk about a lot on Government Secrets, which is this is America's help. We sanction and ruin a country. And the first ever slave rebellion was in Haiti, and America was like, woo, we can't let that happen. We've been, I mean, there's people.
Yeah, the slave rebellion that worked. They took their own country. And they've been poor ever since, partially because they ultimately owed billions of dollars to France for getting their freedom. Like, they had to pay France because France took them to like international court and said, you took away our slaves. And they said, oh, sorry, here's billions upon billions of dollars.
Yeah. And it's funny, like Claire Daly, who's in the EU Parliament, who's amazing. And she recently last week was like, all the West has done is made Haiti's life horrible to where this kind of stuff has to happen, where there's revolutions and revolts and civil wars. And then how does America do? Hey, here's some guns. It's what we do in our own country. We decimate communities. We don't have drinkable water. We make people poor and wait in lines for food. But that's easy access to guns, and then we just like
we also send a lot of cops in. We put a lot of cops in the areas, that are poor, and we go here. This will fix. This will fix how we.
And then anytime there's a problem, we never look at what caused the problem. It's just more guns, more cops. I guess we need metal detectors in schools. Like it's
we address the symptoms,
never
the problem.
Never the problem. And again, part of the problem is, look, you had to go to Al Jazeera to get that article, and our media is not covering this at all. You know, like we're sending.
There were some articles from other media, but the reason I went to Al Jazeera is because that headline seemed a bit more legit, whereas the other headlines are like, U.S. helps poor struggling Haiti. Like,
it's all we do. All America has done is sanctioned and bombed and destroyed large portions of the world. That's all America has done.
And my favorite thing that we did to Haiti, which many people don't know, is in 2004, we legit just flew in a military plane, grabbed their president, kidnapped him, Aristide, and just dropped it, like parachuted him into Africa. And we were just like, we just took the guy and we were like, yeah, just fucking go over there. Because we didn't like him. And he was the first ever democratically elected president of Haiti, and we kidnapped him and flew him away.
Weird. That's such a recurring theme on Government Secrets. Democratically elected, socializes, stuff, or gives the natural resources to the revenues back to the people. We better airlift that guy out of there, or CIA coup him, or whatever, to get rid of him.
Right. All right. So Graham, I want to give everybody the cities again, for anyone who's listening or watching, that you should absolutely check out Graham's stand-up comedy. He's been doing stand-up for roughly 916 years, and he's quite good. So you're gonna fucking love it. And he's playing New York, Chicago. Where else?
So I'm in New York the 18th, Madison the 20th this week, Detroit October 21st, Cincinnati October 22nd, and Chicago October 26th. Go support independent comedy, support real lefty comedy. That there's only a handful of us comics even talking about this. And so go to grahamelwood.com and also support freedom of speech.
Yeah, and someone go into Times Square and draw Graham's face back on that billboard.
Yeah, and I tell you, and if you see any of my billboards anywhere around these cities I just mentioned, take a photo of it, tag me on social media, and DM me, and I'll give you a coupon code.
All right, and also everybody check out Government Secrets, the show we co-host if you haven't already. Thanks, Graham, and I hope the tour continues to be awesome.
Thanks, buddy. Good seeing you.
All right, that was Graham Elwood. Okay, I want to get to our next guest because I don't want to run out of time, and I'm really excited to have her on. Reality winner. Many of you, I'll show one headline from. Let's see here, but obviously a major mainstream media story was Reality winner's arrest and imprisonment, and the longest ever serving civilian for leaking under the Espionage Act, serving in prison. I mean, prison term. And anyway, this was several months, or maybe it's been a year. I'll ask her in a moment. But anyway, so yeah, without further ado, here's Reality winner.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Sorry about the miscommunication about the time, and I'm glad to have you here. And since I just mentioned it, how long have you been out of prison now?
I've been out of prison for approximately a year and a few months out of physical prison. I was released in June 2021, but I was formally released from BOP custody in November 2021.
So I imagine most people who watch this know your story, but if you want to give kind of the quicker rundown, I know you're tired of telling it, but I feel like you'd do a better job than I would.
Right. So in 2017, I was arrested and indicted for leaking a top secret document to The Intercept, online media journalist outlet. And within a year, pled guilty and received 63 months in prison and 3 months of supervised federal release, which is basically the federal version of probation. So right now I have a probation officer. I can't travel more than 3 hours away from home. I do regular drug tests, and I have to report monthly to probation till November 2024.
And I mean, I may, as we talk, I don't know where I may cross the line into what you're not allowed to talk about, and you can just let me know. But in general, are you, how freely are you allowed to speak now?
Right. So I want to say half of my plea deal and probation requirements actually deal with what I can and cannot say. And
Yeah.
then making sure that I never make a dollar off of my name or story. They're broad, they're vague, and we've kind of just been towing the line and trying to figure out where it stands. Pretty much anytime I'm seen on media or do interviews, there are questions from the court. And then those questions are just like, were you paid? And I'm like, you don't get paid for doing podcasts, but okay.
Right.
You know?
Right. This show does not offer millions of dollars to guests to come on. Well, speaking of that in the interviews, well, and I guess this also gets to something I want to ask about, The Intercept and how quickly it all unfolded. The Intercept has had a major issue with this, revealing leakers, and you're not the only one. And John Kiriakou, who is a former CIA officer, whistleblower, and also served time in prison for revealing the U.S. torture program, he has said many times that The Intercept is doing just a horrific job, and no one should ever leak to The Intercept. So I don't know if you wanted to speak on that.
Right. So I wasn't the brightest 25-year-old, and I definitely missed that memo in 2017.
I don't know if the memo was out enough yet.
Right. I absolutely, ever since that, it's been a very eye-opening experience, and then understanding that I'm not the only one, and that I think it's almost by design that they don't protect sources so that they can then basically profit on being the only voice of the martyr. They did the same thing to Terry Aubrey. They did the same thing to Daniel Hale. And for me, it's like, oh, well, they didn't protect you as a source. And I said, well, they didn't have to, because they had material to write about for the past 3 years.
And just as a side note, Glenn Greenwald, who has since left The Intercept and is very critical of them, he worked very hard to protect Snowden when they revealed Snowden's information. But Glenn has said he had nothing to do with the article about your leak. We don't need to get into all the details of the arrest and everything, but how do you feel you were treated through all this and the sentence and everything? And I guess we can talk about the Espionage Act in general as well.
Right. Well, I will always take responsibility. I told the FBI what I did within about 20 minutes or so. And when I did what I did, I didn't actually put it into like a criminal context. I didn't be like, oh, I'm committing X felony. Even though I've been briefed on it, that's usually like those days are like death by PowerPoint, in one ear, out the other.
Right.
So even though I wasn't really aware that it was such a severe felony, I definitely committed a felony, and I've always taken responsibility for that. However, when it does come to the Espionage Act, there is no provision for criminal intent or mens rea, and there is no provision for whether or not actual espionage was committed if you gave said information to a hostile foreign nation. There are some clauses in the Espionage Act that do it. However, I want to say like 80% of the Espionage Act actually has to do with controlling dissent. And because this act was written into law a year after United States instated the draft in 1917. So it has to do a lot with controlling information and controlling people's voices inside the United States, and not a lot to do with espionage. However, and then 793E, which is willful retention and disclosure of national defense information. So I certainly willfully retained and disclosed classified top secret information. How in a court of law, once a prosecutor says this was also national defense information, there's no legal standard for what national defense information is. It could have been a top secret stick figure for all you and I know.
Right.
And the fact is that my defense team, time and time again, tried to question that in court. What is national defense information? And what makes this national defense information? What damage was actually done to sources and methods? And time again, it wasn't the prosecution or the government. It was the court itself that said the government has no burden of proof in justifying what national defense information is, and they don't have to provide evidence of damage. And they also do not the prosecution could go into what they thought my intent was and what they thought my character was. The moment my defense team tried to push back on that and said, well, this doesn't actually make sense, this is not who she is, the court itself said, you can't make that argument. It has to be stricken from the record. It's not actually relevant to the prosecution of this case. It was a very Kafkaesque trial. And so that's why I'm so skeptical of charges under, especially 793E, that we are charging people for leaking information to the media with actual espionage. As far as the law is concerned, and as far as my probation is concerned, I committed the highest severity felony in the United States. I committed espionage under this law. And I always thought in espionage, there had to be another country. So
Right.
That's the law is so broad and sweeping and vague that, and it's almost impossible to defend in court. If you did X conduct, then the entire law applies to you and you don't get to argue it.
Yeah, and you said it was the law was put into effect in 1917, and it was I believe it was that law that was used to arrest Eugene Debs, who was ran for president many times as a socialist, and they arrested him they made it illegal to even say you were opposed to war in a public speech. And so he was arrested for one sentence in a speech where he said something like, our wars are always for profit, or not for good, or something like that. And then the Espionage Act was hardly used until Obama used it something like 7 times, and it was the most ever to use it. And now it seems like it's just common for them to arrest anybody who leaks anything and say it's espionage.
Not anyone, not members of Congress.
Oh, yeah.
Not unnamed sources from the DOJ talking about classified proceedings.
Great point. Yeah.
Not when the DOJ releases photos of the documents from Mar-a-Lago. That wasn't an illegal leak at all. That was totally legitimate,
Right. You corrected me very well. Our government leaks stuff endlessly to reporters when it is stuff that furthers U.S. propaganda. It's or U.S. aims, whether it's propaganda or not. U.S. aims. Basically, those are approved leaks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and something else that, and I don't know if your issue or trial got into any of this, but Keriaku talked about how you're not allowed to give a necessity defense in any manner. You're not allowed to say I needed to leak this information, which was something that he had wanted to and tried to do, and all of his witnesses, everything were banned from the courts.
Yes, so you cannot make a public interest argument. It is not built into the law itself. And furthermore, we actually had a former classification czar testify on my behalf on whether or not this document needed to even be classified in the first place, and whether or not this information was already out into the public. It didn't have the branding of NSA on it. So very likely this information was already well known. And so his testimony was completely disregarded, even though he was a Bush appointed intelligence head. And, my lead counsel was a former Republican attorney general of the state of Georgia, completely disrespected in this court of law. I mean, it was unreal what was happening in this very small federal courthouse in Augusta, Georgia. They knew exactly what the playing field was. I mean, I would have done prison time. I would have pled guilty in any court, because as far as 793E goes, I willfully retained and disclosed national defense information. But just being able to set a legal precedence and to try to make a public interest argument, for the sake of just exercising my rights as a defendant in the criminal justice system. That simply was not possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you about I believe you've been outspoken about prison conditions. You want to talk about a little what the prison seemed like, what prisons in the U.S. Are facing?
You know, my first week there, I was in a county jail. So I think a lot of people want to go after the feds because it's big and glamorous, but most of the mass incarceration that happens in this country is at the local level. It's at the county jails and it's in state prisons. And these are where the conditions are the worst because it's where the oversight is from the city itself. So they always get passing conditions. It rained inside our jail cell, but we always got an A+ as far as prison conditions were. To me, the first thing was, how are all these people who haven't been convicted yet being expected to peaceably accept these conditions? And, you know, when you realize, like, we are asking millions of Americans to undergo systemic abuse and neglect every single day. I mean, there were times when I had a friend or even a woman that I didn't even know that well or wasn't sympathetic to was having a medical emergency. And the only thing I could do was call my mom. And she tried to get a hold of the sheriff's office and they weren't having it. So she called the county commissioner and basically said, you know, there's a medical emergency happening in the women's cell block at the Lincolnton County Jail. And
wow.
All of a sudden an officer's coming back there and is like, Winter, why your mama calling everybody? I'm like, she's going to call the president if you don't get this woman some help. Like,
Wow.
Don't blame me. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was insane. And all of a sudden, the nurse shows up at 8:00 at night to inspect this woman and be like, oh, well, it's a Friday night. The soonest we can get you to the dentist is Monday. And it's like, she's been asking for help since Wednesday. Just things like that. I mean, if you are going to house people, they must have access to fresh air and sunlight, because if you cannot manage your circadian rhythm the way it is in county jail, where it never gets dark, the lights are never fully extinguished, and you have no sense of when the sun rises and sun sets, that is a trigger for every other source of mental illness.
Yeah.
My mental illness just went out of control in county jail, you know, and more often than not, the county jail is the first stop for people who are in a mental health crisis to begin with. And then most of the repeat offenders in that county jail were women who were still battling addiction. Their addiction was their crime. And the county jail did nothing to deal with that.
Right.
There was a woman, 46 years old, functionally illiterate. You know, she possibly had a learning disability before 20 years of drugs, but that certainly didn't help. And I remember going to the captain after a couple months saying like, yo, I can't do this anymore. Like, this woman, she speaks in tongues. She bangs her head on the wall. She runs around kissing us. She's insane. And he said, oh yeah, that's just, you know, I'm not going to say her name, but that's just so-and-so, you know, she shows up once a year. We fatten her up and then release her.
Wow.
I was just like, this is not an animal shelter. Why are you referring to this woman the way you would refer to like an animal rescue program? She's mentally ill and she's a lifelong addict, and poverty isn't helping. There was another woman. All she wanted to do was live in the dumpster behind the Hardys. And the people at Hardee's objected to that. So anytime the police went out there to remove her from her chosen home, she would assault them because she was not sentient at all. She was arrested 3 times in my year there. And one time it was midnight, so we were all asleep. And we woke up and she's standing in the middle of the room, smelling like fecal matter, talking to someone that's not there. And getting more and more agitated and violent. So, you know, we gathered all up together. We got into like this little phone booth area and had, you know, me and another large inmate holding the door shut so she couldn't get in. And then somebody else flagging down the camera because we didn't have a crisis button. The only thing we could do was try to rip the door open to get somebody's attention or wave at the camera.
Wow.
And this woman has never been, you know, they just keep arresting her, sending her to the state hospital. They didn't even know her name at that point. Like, you can arrest somebody in America without even knowing their name.
I mean, yeah, the estimates are that 50% of like people who cycle into jails are, you know, mentally ill, and the fact that we just keep arresting them and then, you know, making it more and more difficult for them to actually establish any kind of life because now they have this arrest record and everything else. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a huge racial aspect to this too, because, you know, I have a friend who has bouts of mental illness and mania and stuff. And he would get arrested for the things he would do while he was manic, but almost always very short term. They would arrest him for the night and then let him go because he is a small white guy. And so it was like they would arrest him because he's, you know, harassing people and running around the town in the middle of the night and doing crazy shit because he's manic. But if you were a black person, I don't think they would be so like, and the number of times he didn't get arrested, I was like, you didn't get arrested for that shit? Like, and so there's a huge racial aspect to this as well. But, yeah.
Oh yeah, I witnessed that firsthand. I mean, even once you get into the feds, like the proper prison, the sentencing disparity. I mean, like we, you know, we're women, we talk, we're curious about like, oh, why are you in here? You know, also to protect yourself so you're not eating chow with a child molester or anything like that. But when we were talking about like the white collar crimes, you know, a white woman convicted of embezzling $2 million gets 7 years, and a black woman convicted of wire fraud for $35,000 from Georgia to Florida got 14.
Wow.
You know, and it's just like, this isn't right.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely gives you a different side.
Why are people in prison for money?
I know. And the US is one of the only, I think there's like one or two others that even have cash bail as a system. It's illegal in many countries because you're basically punishing poverty. You're basically saying, do you have a bunch of money to throw at this? And then we'll let you out. So a lot of people just get stuck in prison because they don't have the money to get out, which is.
You mean, you know how crazy cash bail is in small rural counties where there's domestic violence ongoing? Both the man and the woman get arrested that night. Who do you think has more financial autonomy? Or who do you think has a mama that's going to bail his ass out? Yeah. So the man's literally walking by the cell block saying goodbye to his woman. She's going to spend 6 weeks until she can go to court, you know, and he's going to get bailed out instantly. And he's the aggressor. Like, the woman came in with the black eye. He's barely scratched. But society doesn't care about who was the victim or who is actually the more dangerous individual. It's who has the money to get out.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to keep you forever. What's one question I should have asked that I didn't? What would you like to, you know, or one question the mainstream media fails to ask or gets wrong about your, you know, your story?
You know, it's kind of funny.
How do you feel like the mainstream media treated you through this?
I feel like a lot of it is I'm either extremely dangerous and insidious and overly cunning, or like I'm like this helpful vegan animal lover. Like, everybody calls me an animal lover. And my sister and I, we always laugh about it. It's like, she doesn't eat animals because she hates animals. Like, I'm not going to put them in my body. I mean, I'm not like save the turtles. Like, you know what I mean? I'm more like a rational. The mainstream media doesn't like to touch on the fact that I'm from a conservative family, that I was born and raised in South Texas, which is very conservative, that up until my felony status, I owned firearms. You know, CNN and MSNBC won't touch on that. And then obviously Fox News is never going to touch my story other than the fact that I didn't like Trump or something like that, and I had pantyhose. I think that was the biggest hang up for the media. And like the thing is, they're like, she was wearing pantyhose. Like, of course she's helpless. And I'm like, I had an athletic body and pants weren't working for me. Like that was the biggest question. Like people always get the pantyhose thing wrong. And it was just like, I was cheap. And
the reason they would bring up the pantyhose is because the printout of the leak you apparently smuggled in the pantyhose. Is that why?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just like, it's such a gendered aspect of this. You know what I mean? They would never talk about how a guy smuggled it out through his sock.
Right.
Yeah. And then I think like another thing is everybody thinks it was just against Trump. And I mean, he's a symptom. He's not the problem. He's a symptom. And for me, this was a direct challenge to our media. And I think that's why they don't like to talk to me, because I'm never going to give them the answers that they want. Like, for example, I wanted to see if the United States people were to get a set of facts on black and white, and they could see how their media portrays it. It was basically like a litmus test of, is Fox News and CNN going to have completely contrasting, news segments about the same piece of paper? And are the American people literate enough to look at that piece of paper and be like, oh, wait, they're both only giving half the story. They're both cherry picking the narrative that they want to support.
Yeah.
And actually, it's worse than that. The media decided to make me the story and who I am and my life history. They went for the even lower hanging fruit of making it about individuals and going for the scandalous.
They tried to do that with Edward Snowden as well. They tried to make it about him and act like he was the story because they didn't want to cover the reality that Snowden had.
Same thing with Chelsea Manning.
Yeah. Well, simply because I find it funny. Are you allowed to mention how Redacted Tonight came up in all of this?
Yeah, absolutely. It was part of the whole "I'm a terrible person" thing. I can't mention why it's so ironic with everything that the court case was actually about. But then they said, oh yeah, and all of her YouTube history is redacted tonight, and everybody knows that's that's on RT America, which is Putin's favorite TV station.
Right.
And it's like, if you were to read the book, I don't know if you've heard of it, like Everything is Possible and Nothing is Real or something like that. It's about modern Russia. And it actually talks about RT America, and it states like it's kind of a mystery because it was completely uncensored television.
Yeah.
It was not propaganda at all. And everybody's wondering like, why would they do that? You know what I mean?
Because most people know my story, but the reason I was at Redacted Tonight, at RT America at all, was because it was the only channel in American television where I could completely be anti-war and speak my mind and not be censored. I wrote every word I said. I was never censored, never told what to say in any way. And there were a lot of people on the right at that network. There were a lot of Trump supporters there. And there were a lot of people on the left, like Chris Hedges and Abby Martin. And people wanted to say, oh, look, here it's putting forward Russian talking points, but it wasn't. The main thing it was doing is allowing people who were outside of what our media will allow onto television. And that's also why it had to be stopped. It's why it's been shut down. So, yeah,
I mean, and nobody, like, it was just like, of course I was silenced at that. I was just like writing notes to my attorney, like, can we just mention that I only watched it because he's the only person in the media talking about this climate crisis? You know what I mean? Like, I remember even in 2017 or 2016, you were like, it's the hottest summer on record. 2011, hottest summer on record. 2012. And here we are. We're still having the hottest summer ever. Every summer is the new hottest summer. And I always go back to that. And I was just like, can we, like, I mean, I'm an environmentalist. Everything that all my views and beliefs about the environment were like the most demonized, everything was in the context of how I felt about, the U.S. government's failure to confront the climate crisis. But again, that's environmental racism, because which parts of the coastline are most affected? And then when a city is destroyed by a hurricane, or two neighboring cities are destroyed, where's the most of the money going to go? It's going to go to the one with the white majority, And so the US media doesn't want to talk about how this climate crisis is going to affect the most vulnerable populations in the United States, and how those populations are the least likely to actually receive the aid that they need to either rebuild or get the fuck out of a hurricane hotspot.
Yeah, it's so true. The rich, and I don't even mean just extremely rich. I mean, the upper middle class, they can leave a disaster. Ted Cruz flew out of Texas to go to Cancun when the deep freeze came and cut off all the electricity. So he went to Cancun for a vacation. It's like, that's what the rich will do. So it'll be the poor and the lower middle class that gets harmed by this far sooner, although everyone will be impacted, but it'll just take longer to hit the rich.
Yeah, and they'll profit the entire way there.
This has really been a pleasure, Reality. Thank you for coming on. If you ever have a story you want to talk about, any environmentalist stories you want to come back on, please hit me up. Any time, and I appreciate you taking the time to get your story out there.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about the time. Sometimes I forget that Texas isn't the center of the universe. It should be the new Greenwich Mean Time. You know what I mean? It should be Texas time. Everybody's like 2 plus Texas, 1 minus Texas.
There's a lot of people in Texas that would agree with you right there.
I mean, we're wonderful.
I love Austin, but I don't know. That's kind of different than Texas, huh?
Yeah. Austin's like the Vatican City. Like if Texas were its own country, Austin would be Rome.
Right. Well, thanks again. Be well, and I hope you get out of whatever this kind of house arrest is soon.
Yeah, probation sucks.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, man.
Thanks. All right, folks. Reality winner. Thank you so much for joining me, everybody. And I let everybody stay in through the whole chat rather than just putting it on Rumble, because I wanted everybody to be able to enjoy this. But I hope you'll go over and subscribe at rumble.com/Lee Camp. Also, if you feel like you got $1 worth out of this, I hope you'll go to leecamp.net and become a member over there. All right. I will talk to you soon. I will see you Wednesday at noon Eastern. Keep fighting.